Question. P.S. If a is smaller than -1, which of the following is or are true? Option 1. -1 is smaller than -a. Option 2. A squared is smaller than 1. Option 3. A minus 1 is smaller than 0. Solution. Cross cases, both negative and positive numbers. Be careful of a squared. Always be careful when dealing with negative numbers, including the cross multiplication cases, which are related differently to positive numbers and negative numbers. If we are given that a is greater than b, we cannot apply the rule a squared is greater than b squared, as we are not aware whether a and b are positive or negative. If we are given that a is greater than b, which is greater or equal to 0, or absolute value of a is greater than absolute value of b, then a squared is greater than b squared. If we are given that 0 is greater or equal to a, which is greater than b, or absolute value of a is smaller than absolute value of b, then a squared is smaller than b squared. The first fundamental concept in inequality. If a is greater than b, which is greater than c, then a is greater than b is greater than c, and a is greater than c. Also, if a is greater than x and x is greater than b, then a is greater than x, which is greater than b. The second fundamental concept in inequality. When we add or subtract a certain number from both sides of an inequality, the sign of inequality does not change. So, if we add or subtract x from both sides of an inequality, it does not affect the inequality sign. If a is greater than b, then a plus or minus x is greater than b plus or minus x. The second property of inequality. Multiplying or dividing by negative numbers changes the direction of the inequality sign, negative rule in inequality. That is, if a is greater than b, then a times x is smaller than b times x, and a over x is smaller than b over x, where x is smaller than 0. We are required to find the options that are true if a is smaller than -1. Option 1. -1 is smaller than -a. We can multiply both sides of the inequality a is smaller than -1 by -1 to get -a is greater than 1. By the second property of inequality, negative rule in inequality. Also, 1 is greater than -1, so -a is greater than 1, which is greater than -1, which further means -a is greater than -1. By the first fundamental concept in inequality. Thus, this option is true. Option 2. A squared is smaller than 1. If a equals -3, which is smaller than -1, then a squared equals -3 squared, which equals 9, which is greater than 1. Thus, this option is not always true. It is important to remember the cross cases where you should consider both negative and positive numbers. Option 3. A minus 1 is smaller than 0. We know that a is smaller than -1 and -1 is smaller than 1. So we get a is smaller than -1, which is smaller than 1. Now a is smaller than -1, which is smaller than 1, will give us a is smaller than 1. Or a minus 1 is smaller than 0 by the first fundamental concept in inequality. Thus, this option is true. Option 3. Alternatively, a minus 1 is smaller than 0. We know that a is smaller than -1. If we subtract 1 from both sides, we get a minus 1 is smaller than negative 1 minus 1, or a minus 1 is smaller than negative 2. Now, know that negative 2 is smaller than 0, so combining a minus 1 is smaller than negative 2, and negative 2 is smaller than 0 gives us a minus 1 is smaller than negative 2 is smaller than 0, which further gives us a minus 1 is smaller than 0 by the first fundamental concept in inequality. Thus, this option is true. Thus, only options 1 and 3 are true, and D will be the correct answer. Answer D.